I left the city, I've been proud. Treading water that they drown. My head on the swivel, yeah. It's only really my surroundings.
Hello and welcome to episode 33 of the Smash Accept podcast. I'm your host, Michael Royer. You can find me on Twitter at Dynasty_DadFF. And as part of our tradition we've been doing over our off-season program here, we have a fantastic guest. But before we get to her, I'm going to introduce my co-host, the man who's on here every week in, week out, the man, the myth, Mung the legend. How you doing?
Hey, how's everybody doing tonight? I'm pretty pumped because we're just a few weeks away from the start of free agency. So I'm pumping out some articles over at Fantrax if you guys want to check that out. And, I'm excited to kind of just listen. I talk a lot on this show, but I am not very experienced with Devy at all. I don't really watch college, so I'm psyched to just hear Katie and, talk about some of the incoming classes and just how she kind of scouts these players before they ever even step on the NFL field.
You stole some of my thunder of my grandiose, entertaining introduction here. But yeah, she's the co-host of Under the Helmet, Off the Rails podcast, known as the Diva of Devy, and makes a fantastic avocado salad. Ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome Katie Flowers to the show.
Here we go. Let's go. Thank you guys for having me join you.
We're super excited to have you on. Mung and I, we just finished up our Smash Accept Listener League, our podcast Listener League, and it's 14 team super flex. And I saw people throwing around 2022 picks like they were candy. And I'm seeing it in the whole offseason of people just, that pick might be worth less than a first. It's worth a second to me. So I'm just going to push that and try to move myself up several rounds and do some things like that. And I started thinking we really need to teach and show the community and show people that are listeners what the 2022 class has to offer. I mean, I feel like we do this year in and year out. We say, that first round draft pick isn't for 2 years. So what does it really matter to my team? And I think we need to totally educate ourselves. We need to realize what that has to do because we just saw what that 2020 class had. And if you weren't educating yourself and in 2019 you started trading off 2020 picks, hopefully you didn't, you missed out on a phenomenal class and you missed out on some big time players. First, Katie, right now, what is your overall rookie draft philosophy? I mean, and how has it changed over the years? I first started playing Dynasty in 2014, and then there was that boom at wide receiver. And then recently we've had, obviously the more of a transition towards the running backs early part in the draft. But what's your overall draft philosophy when you're going into the season?
I started redraft fantasy football in 2012, and I started Dynasty in 2014. I started Devy in 2015 because I got hooked on Dynasty, absolutely love it. And one of the things that I love about being in Devy leagues, it really helps prep you for your rookie drafts. And what I say as far as rookie drafts go, draft best player available. I don't care about position. A lot of people are like, this class has a lot of wide receivers and I really need running backs. And so I'm just going to trade for next year's or trade for something else and just get out of this class. And if that's your philosophy, that's fine. And if people are willing to send you next year's draft picks for seconds, Smash accept that because
she used it right there. All right. Yeah. I love it.
Because that's where you get value. And I am all about getting the best player available so that I've got assets on my team that if I want to flip them for a veteran or whatever, I can do that. You want a portfolio of players that are going to rise in value and not decline in value. And so future rookie picks, what are they going to do? Have you ever seen a future rookie pick, even in a bad class? Have you ever seen a rookie pick decrease in value? No. Right about now until May or whenever your rookie draft is, those picks are just going to rise and rise. So my philosophy when it comes to rookie drafts, I look at all the players available. Draft capital is big, but I have to believe in the player and not just go with the crowd. I'm going to take my guy if I can't trade out of the spot. If I don't like the particular player that's best player available and I can't trade, I still want to take the best player available.
Yeah,
no matter what position, and trade for need. Later on, you trade for need.
Exactly. I keep hearing people, even in rebuilding process, say, "Hey, I want to move up, or I want to trade for certain players," and I'm like, value is in the picks. The picks are fluid. They're only going to increase. Do not trade them now. Wait till we get closer. The value will have no more than when you're on the clock. When you're on the clock, everybody wants in there, and that's when they really come after you, and that's where you can really accumulate some value. Over the years, I mean, obviously in 2014, we had an overcorrection at wide receiver, and then 2017 and 2020 was such a special class. Are you seeing, or do you sense in the community that we're having an overcorrection of people really trying to buy heavily on the rookie picks when, the 2021 class is nice, but it's not the 2020 class?
Well, it depends. It's a very nice class in and of itself. It's just not deep at running back. It's got a lot of wide receivers, top end wide receivers, and depth at wide receivers. It's got some decent tight ends. Last year it was a desert for tight ends. This year there's 3 guys, maybe a 4th guy that may come on later as a sleeper type guy. And then if it's super flex, your quarterbacks are very strong this year, and it helps make the depth of this class. So last year's class was special with a lot of really good top end running backs and some very quality wide receivers, and still guys that haven't broken out yet that will, and guys that people are they're underselling now because they're not patient. And that's the thing in Dynasty and in Devy. You have got to be patient. If you're not a patient owner, then no, it doesn't make any sense. You might as well trade your picks for candy. You might as well give me your money now. And in December, when everybody else is collecting money, just, sorry, I can't buy you a Christmas present because I went broke on fantasy football.
I love it. Mung and I have been talking for a while here, and I know he had some questions of how, how you get into Devy and what you would say to people that are going in there. So Mung, why don't you hit her up with what you had there?
Yeah, I mean, really, Mike and I are pretty seasoned Dynasty players, but when it comes to Devy, I know very little. Why don't you just kind of sell us and maybe some of the listeners who have never played that format? Because personally, I don't even know how the rookie drafts or the Devy drafts work, because obviously some of those college players are already on rosters, but do you even have a separate rookie and college draft, and what's the timing of that?
So it really varies from league to league. But first of all, Devy stands for developmental, which means you can draft any kid in college. Most leagues allow you to draft any kid that has declared, as long as they are incoming freshmen. You can draft anybody from incoming freshmen until anybody that has not declared for this year's NFL draft. And what I like about it, you can have leagues where there's only 1 pick per person, 1 Devy player per person, and it's kept as a separate draft. And they hold that draft in February after the declarations of who's going to the NFL, so that and then you have your rookie draft in May or June or whenever you normally would have a rookie draft. And it's only depleted by possibly a half dozen guys. And therefore the rookie picks keep their value. The Devy picks keep their value. Everybody's happy, hunky-dory. And it's kind of like tipping your toe into the Devy pool. And some leagues have a separate taxi squad where you can have 30 players deep on your taxi squad. I'm in some very deep Devy leagues, and I friggin' love it because I'm the kind of person that wants to load that taxi squad straight to the gill to have an incoming constant flow of talent. Devy's very risky. It is highly risky because players that you think are great, when they're freshmen, they look awesome. Sometimes they get injured. Sometimes they never get off top dead center. There's another couple guys in front of them on the depth chart, and they never quite win that starting job, or they transfer and then they don't like their coach, or they get into trouble. They're, throwing frisbees in the dorm or shooting BB guns, shooting lights out with a BB gun and get busted and stuff like that. So, and trying to peg talent from a huge, huge college pool. Think of rookies and how hard it is to hit with such a small, finite number of guys. With college football, you've got the whole landscape, not just Power 5, but you've got the smaller schools. There's always somebody. Even in Superflex, Devy drafts where you can draft all the quarterbacks in all of college football, somebody still always falls through the crack. And this year, Zach Wilson and Trey Lance in a lot of Devy leagues have fallen through the cracks, and they'll be tops in rookie drafts. And last year, Joe Burrow fell through the cracks. The year before, it's been Carson Wentz, it's been Josh Allen, guys that are now very good quarterbacks have fallen through the Devy cracks. Even Patrick Mahomes was not a big Devy name. He was a 3-star recruit and playing at Texas Tech. Nobody really even looked at him in Devy unless you were in the deepest of leagues. And so it's so much fun. Anybody that loves college football, that watches a lot of college football like I do, it adds and enhances your NFL dynasty experience. The ability to trade assets, and sometimes you do have a combined draft. In those deeper leagues, in order to maintain the rookie draft being valuable, a combined where you can pick either a rookie or a Devy when you're on the clock. Some leagues limit to 72 total in the league. You may have 36 from the year before that are still on rosters. That means in the draft, when you hit 36 more, whoever that last one is, it could be the 4th round, it could be the 5th round, or whenever it is, that's it. Now you can only pick rookies or free agents. So there's a lot of different varieties, a lot of depths of taxi squads. Some Devy leagues, you got to put the Devy players right on your active roster. And so then it kind of squeezes you. How much do you want to invest in high risky picks that are going to take up roster spots versus how much do you want to have players that can help you win now? And there's a lot of strategy, and I'm a big strategist. That's why I love this game. For me, it's all about the strategy.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds dynasties like that gateway to something you're even talking about that's even more, just out there for some of our listeners. We try to cater to a lot of people that are just switching from just redraft to dynasty, and they're like, wow, there's so much more involved, with rookie picks and things like that. But then when you dive into Devy, it's like, it just seems like so much more is out there. You originally got in because you were more of a college football fan, or you were just trying to test yourself to the next level?
I think it was once I learned about dynasty, I knew that was for me more than redraft. And I wanted to explore the different formats. And when I saw it, it was just immediately, it's like, okay, let's go. The first league I joined was pick one Devy player, but I'm not really an addictive personality. But when it comes to something that I love, the way that I feel is once you have the knowledge of the players, it's a waste to only have one team. You really need to invest in other teams in order to really help. And then it kind of helps offset the amount of extra time that you're going to spend on researching. So I'm in about 30 leagues right now. Not all of them are Devy. Some of them are best ball, so I don't have to start lineups. But I was at one point up to about 50, and that did get to be too many, so I had to back off. Now with COVID being a COVID year, I had more time to do things that I wanted to fantasy football wise, and I felt like 30 was a good amount. I like to add 1 or 2 startups each year. The other thing about Devy, and it's the same with Dynasty, you mentioned people already trading next year's picks. They're throwing them away like candy. They do that even more in Devy. They look at a 6th-round pick, a 6th-round college pick, and they think, oh, this is nothing. Anything from that's not a 1st round, 2nd round on, they'll add 4 picks to a deal in a trade just to make the trade. And the way that I look at Devy is like Steph Curry hitting a 3. You can hit from anywhere. And that's been a phrase that I've said for, 6 years now. And it's true. I got Jerry Jeudy in the 6th round of a deeper Devy league in the 6th round because I liked his profile. And you can get guys like Cooper Kupp or Kareem Hunt if you dig deeper and go behind the scenes instead of taking somebody else's rankings and just saying, okay, I only like these top 12 because this is what everybody's talking about. These guys are the highest touted players. Find the next one. Watch a little bit of film. Do a little bit of have fun, grab a beer and watch some film. And
Where are you finding like the high school film for those incoming freshmen, and kind of what resources do you even use for that? Because I wouldn't even know where to start.
247 and Rivals have some film, and I watched the high school All-American game. I record that. There's several websites where you can just Google the name of a player. Once you see the rankings, and 247 and Rivals have class rankings, even into junior high school right now, if you really wanted to go down and take a look at that. But they'll give you the rankings, who's a 5-star, who's a 4-star, and then you start there, and then you just start Googling names and looking for film and finding YouTube. I mean, everybody's got film somewhere.
Katie, I'm going to give you a heads up on that 2030 class. My son's a stud running back, all right? I'm just letting you know he's going to be breaking into it, and then I'll give you the inside scoop. Maybe I'll be in one of your leagues by that time, because I'm excited I listen to you on Under the Helmet and talk about what kind of passion you have for the college game and for Dynasty in general. And it's just like, for our listeners that are out there that are in one Dynasty league, add another. The more value you get, the more time you put into this, diversifying and getting multiple teams is just so much more fun and exciting. When I first started, I had 10 redraft leagues, and then I started my first Dynasty, and Tim Smith got me into it. It was a writer's league. I won year one. And then I was like, yo, I like this, right? I get to keep my team. And then now I'm down to one redraft league. It's my home league. And now I'm up to 14 dynasties because it's so much fun. You get to interact with so many different people. And, that's just something that I suggest. And if you guys are looking for leagues, hit Mung or myself up, and we can help get you into leagues with people that are kind of in the same boat as you. And that's why we really try to do that with our listener league, is put some of those guys in there, give you guys some of our insight, be able to talk to us, and just have some fun. So right now, obviously, all of our listeners are preparing for their rookie drafts, and we train our listeners to always be looking for trades. We encourage that. We are a trade podcast, so we say go out in every one of your leagues and, make an offer once a week or every other week, and try to keep things moving and be that way. Right now, considering the 2020 picks, how does the 2022 class compare to this current class, position by position? What are we looking at? A lot of people say, this class is a lot of wide receivers, not a lot of running backs, some solid tight ends. But what do we have looking forward to 2022 in comparison? Okay,
so 2022 has 2 running backs right off the top that are going to be studs. And I think the NFL does not value running backs as much as we do on our fantasy team. That being said, if there's 1 or 2 that make it to the first round of next year's draft, that would be amazing. This year's class, the 2020 class had 5 running backs go in the second round of the NFL draft. And that is, for a wide receiver, round 1 is the round. Running back, if you get drafted in round 2, that's saying that you're a starter. That's saying we have faith in you. If you get drafted in round 1 as a running back, especially really high, like Saquon Barkley, Ezekiel Elliott, that tells you that they think that you're elite. You don't have to be elite to be a good fantasy running back, but you do have to be a starter or part of a committee. And you either have to have one of 2 traits. You either need to be the bell cow, the guy that's going to be handling most of the carries for the team, or you need to be a home run hitter of some kind. And in PPR, that means somebody that can receive the football, that can carry the football, and be that 1B to somebody's 1A, and still get enough juice to put up, 10 to 15 fantasy points with a ceiling that's much higher. And with an injury, maybe even be that guy for a short period of time. But that's what you're looking for. And so next year, there's 2 right off the top, Isaiah Spiller and Breece Hall. They're both really good running backs, and they both have pass catching abilities. I think that they've got the size, they've got the speed, and they've put up 2 good years. Their freshman and sophomore years have both been productive. They could be 3 down running backs in the NFL. And then outside of that, you got guys like Zamir White from Georgia, who had an injury. He went back. Everybody thought he was going to come out this year. He stayed for an extra year. He was the number 1 running back in Devy coming off the board 2 years ago. But because of injuries, he really hasn't gone and risen like some of the others. But he's got the size. He's 6 foot tall, 215, which is a good size for a running back going into the NFL. He's got speed, he's got hands, and Master Teague out of Ohio State. We saw what he could do. I think he's right in that 6 foot, 225 zone. Then you got guys that have been highly recruited. They were 5-star, but either because of injury or some other circumstance. John Emery from LSU and Trey Sanders from Alabama, they both have got juice, big time juice. They just haven't had the production. And running backs don't need 4 years of production like wide receivers. You look at guys like Antonio Gibson and Alvin Kamara, they were not very productive in college for whatever reason or another, and they've done just fine in the pros. So if John Emery and or Trey Sanders has a good season, that's all it's going to take. And then behind that, you've got another bunch of guys. You got guys like Kevin Harris out of South Carolina. He's 5'10", 225, and very productive as well, both catching and running the football. Zach Charbonnet just transferred from Michigan to UCLA. So I'm just right now there's about 8 guys, and they're all over 200 pounds. When you get a running back class that's 175 pounds and that's the best guy, that's really pretty lame. But I'm looking forward to next year's class. I think the running backs, and if they all come back, there's always some that will stay in school, but the guys that could come out. And then that's not even mentioning Eric Gray, who just transferred to Oklahoma from Tennessee. He's got some potential to rise up. Kyron Williams out of Notre Dame. James Cook, another one out of Georgia. That's Dalvin Cook's younger brother. So I think next year's running back class is going to be sneaky good and could be really good. The wide receivers for next year, I think this year we're going to have about 5 or 6 that make it to the first round of the NFL draft. That's really good. And that's back-to-back years. We had 6 in last year. Last year's first round, we had 7 in the second round. So 13 wide receivers last year went in the first 2 rounds. It is getting to be a saturated market. And with this year's free agency, you got guys like Allen Robinson, Chris Godwin. There's going to be some merry-go-round with the players. But looking forward, there's 4 big names. David Bell out of Purdue. He's 6'2", 205. And, people like Rondale Moore, I've been a David Bell stan for a long time already. George Pickens is a mean, tough dude out of Georgia, 6'3", 200 pounds. I call him Slim Pickens, though. He needs to put on a little bit of his man weight, but he can throw people around, and he's just nasty. Garrett Wilson out of Ohio State is another one. And Traylon Burks, he's really climbing up the ranks. And you know who he plays for? Woo Pig Suey, my Razorbacks. And it's the first time I've been saying it to Chad for the last couple years. It's the first time that Arkansas has had 2 wide receivers that are over 6'2" that actually are 4-star athletes that can catch the ball and are pretty fast. And Traylon Burks he's got over 10-inch hands. I think he's got 11-inch hands, and he had to have custom gloves made for him. So watch out for him this year. And Justin Ross is coming off of a bad congenitive neck injury. Well, it was from birth. So he just had surgery to correct the flaw in his neck. But same guy that did the work on Mike Williams, and he's going to be back at Clemson this year. So Chris Olave went back to school for Ohio State. Jaden Hazelwood out of Oklahoma. Drake London, not much buzz on him yet, but he's USC, and he's a big dude. He reminds me a lot of Mike Evans if you watch his frame. So I think next year is going to be good, both running back and wide receiver. I don't think you should be selling picks at a discount. And if somebody wants to sell a pick at a discount, like I said earlier, do it, buy it. Rookie picks do not go down in value. You don't have to assign a name to them. You've got that pick. And especially if the guy blows up his team and it ends up a really good 101, 102, that is so bonus.
Yeah, I know. I heard you talk about it in our group chat the other day, Mung, is sometimes people make those trades and they buy a 2021 first, or in this case, a 2022 first, and you say, well, that guy's a contender. But we don't know what that roster is going to look like in 2 years. And so now you projected that as a late first. Now all of a sudden that becomes a mid first, and you won out big time. I hear a lot of analysts, and I'll let both of you guys talk about this. We'll start with you, Mung. But I hear a lot of analysts say, well, that first round pick 2 years out is worth a mid-second. And to me, it's still worth a first-round pick. I just feel like as a whole, I'm hearing a lot of people pushing, saying that pick isn't worth a true first. Mung, I mean, how do you value your rookie picks, and is that something that you've seen out there?
Yeah, I think that's the general consensus, that future picks don't hold, the exact value, and I understand why. And to an extent, it definitely makes sense because of the opportunity cost, right? You're holding these picks for that period of time, but they will eventually gain value. So it's really subjective as to, at what point do you trade a future first for a pick on the clock, right? Whether it's 2.01 or 2.03. And really it comes down to, for me, whether you think that the player that you're targeting there is going to increase in value by that much. Because at the end of the day, it's going to depend on how they perform this season. We've seen guys like N'Keal Harry, who is worth, a third-round rookie pick now? But then last year, if you traded a future first for a guy like Cam Akers or Antonio Gibson even, if you traded that first in that mid-second round where Gibson was falling, then clearly you're happy. So it's a targeted risk, and it's just kind of a lot really depends on your team's roster, contending versus rebuilding, and then also how much you believe in that player.
Yeah, and a lot of times you can make out on that if you are rebuilding, right? So you make an offer. 2 years ago, I offered Russell Wilson for Kyler Murray, his rookie year, and a first. And the guy's like, well, it's a late first, and Russell Wilson's going to have a great year. And then I got Kyler Murray, and now that pick in 2022 is going to be Justin Fields because it's the 102. And that's how you totally just redo your team, and where you make what we talk about on here all the time is insulated risks, right? You trade a player for a player and a pick, and a lot of times those picks end up being worth a lot more than what you anticipated.
Yeah, and here's the thing, right now in the off season, it's not really worthwhile to project these picks to a certain extent, right? By September, October, I'm projecting early to mid in terms of where these picks might fall. But right now, I've had rosters with Saquon Barkley last year, George Kittle, guys who just got injured. You don't know where these firsts are going to end up this early in the offseason. That's something you start to project, early season, and even mid-season, a lot can still change.
Absolutely. Mung, I don't want to steal your question here on breakout rate age, so I'll let you shoot on that one as well.
Yeah, for sure. So, Katie, I mean, a lot of times we hear about these wide receivers coming out, and we're talking about breakout age, right? But we don't really hear that about running backs. And you mentioned a couple minutes ago that, running backs really only need that 1 year productivity to really shoot up draft boards. And, kind of why is that? Is there a reason you think the age doesn't quite matter as much for running backs?
Well, yeah, because you have Harris coming out, and Harris is 23, which is, a little bit on the older side, but he's still right. So I understand what you're saying there. Go ahead, Katie.
Yeah. So in let's use Najee Harris as an example. He was a 5-star recruit at Alabama. Who was there at Alabama when he first came on? You got Damian Harris. You had I'm drawing a blank right now. Derrick Henry, you had all kinds of guys in front of him because it's a pipeline program. What matters most for running backs, in my opinion, is for them, when you say 5-star recruit, that holds water. It holds weight with running backs compared to any other position. It does not matter a bit for quarterbacks, and I know we'll get into that shortly. I hope that we will get into that and address that.
Yeah.
With wide receivers, not a lot. Did you know that Devontae Adams was a 3-star wide receiver at Fresno State? Some of the guys that are 3-star or 4-star never went to the camps, but yet they've got the physical attributes, or maybe their grades weren't good enough for them to get into college, or to be able to participate in all the extracurricular football activities. Some had to work in order to help their family, and they didn't get noticed. And so there's a lot of wide receivers that can rise up the board more so with running backs. Running back like Alvin Kamara, he was a 5-star guy recruited at Alabama, ended up not getting the playing time. He was buried on the depth chart, went to Tennessee, still couldn't get the playing time behind Jalen Hurd, who is now with San Francisco, kind of a Swiss Army knife type guy. But you scratch your head, why didn't he get playing time? You look at him now. He's really talented. So as long as they put together some sort of production, but more so they have those athletic traits. They've got the size, they can cut, they've got vision, they've got functional power, functional speed. Those are the kinds of things that matter when in the NFL when it comes to, it's kind of like the lunch pail type job. It isn't always sexy. You're going to be the guy that's pounding the rock. But you can also look like a hero if you've got track speed and, any other gifts that go with it.
Yeah, I mean, that position, it matters so much about being a 5-star recruit, about being your draft capital. And that's why all season where people were like, what do I do with Cam Akers? It's like, you hold on to him. I mean, he was the number one recruit. He was the guy in that class, just struggled a little bit at Florida State behind poor offensive line, poor quarterback play. And then I had a lot of people reaching out and they're like, well, is that just translating to the NFL? I'm like, no, be patient. The talent is clearly there. That's a guy that you need to be buying, not selling. The 21 wide receiver class is looking pretty deep, but there's some exciting wide receivers like you talked about, Bell, Pickens, Wilson in 22. How would you compare the two classes? And is there any Devy standouts, that stand out to you more than the others? Like compare the two classes a little bit, if you had to say who's the best prospect out of those two we are right now.
Every class is different. Wide receiver is so tough because a lot of that comes down to the college system that they're in. The most translatable things when it comes to wide receivers, athleticism, route running, and hands. And I think that this year's class, by the time that next year's class comes in, I think I'm not sure that David Bell stacks up exactly like Jamar Chase. I think Jamar Chase is very special, but I think that David Bell, George Pickens, Justin Ross, Garrett Wilson, Treylon Burks, Drake London, I think they're going to be names that we all talk about, as much in love with them as we are with Jalen Waddle and Rashad Bateman and Rondale Moore and Devonta Smith and all these other guys. I don't know that there's a Jamar Chase in next year's class, but there's certainly a lot of good wide receivers that should go in the first round of the NFL. And again, it's going to be all about opportunity because the market is starting to get a little bit saturated in the last couple of draft classes. We had 13 go in the first 2 rounds. Last year, we had 9 go the year before. I think next year we'll probably have 4, maybe 5 go in round 1, and then another 4 or 5 go in round 2. So it's decent. I don't know that it's going to be quite as deep as this class or last year, but it's shaping up.
I like it. I love how you're talking about Jamar Chase. I've had arguments on here. We had Izzy Alcafaz on, and he was telling me right now, dynasty value, he'd have him at the equivalent of, say, a Deontay Johnson. And I'm like, Jamar Chase's ceiling to me is elite. I mean, what he was able to do last year was phenomenal as a guy who was 19 years old. I mean, Jamar Chase has some serious upside in the NFL. Speak to our listeners a little bit more about him and kind of where you would be comfortable taking him in a Superflex rookie draft.
In a Superflex rookie draft, I think people are going to be able to get a discount on him, especially if it's a Superflex with tight end premium. I've done a lot of mock drafts. It's Trevor Lawrence, Justin Fields, Najee Harris, Travis Etienne, Kyle Pitts, and then Jamar Chase. So 5 or 6, somewhere in there, and middle of the first. I don't care if it's Superflex. And sometimes even Zach Wilson or Trey Lance gets in there, and then he goes to the 7 or 8. I think that special as he will be, and I think he's going to be a top 10. I'm not sure if Miami takes him or if they trade back a little bit and then still take him, but I think he'll be a top 10 NFL receiver, and I think he's every bit the part. There's only one thing that concerns me about him, but I'm not that concerned.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of mocks have him going to 3 to Miami, and you get him in a situation where he's going to be that alpha right off the bat, and he could see a similar type workload to obviously what Justin Jefferson did, and it was absolutely amazing to watch what those two guys did with Joe Burrow. But when I was watching the games, Jefferson impressed me, but Jamar Chase was like another world. Like, it blew my mind. So I'm just super excited. I've been gushing about him all offseason. I had to get that in there because you mentioned him. And then you mentioned, quarterbacks here. I mean, if you need a rookie quarterback in Superflex, it seems this is a good year to get your guy. I mean, obviously, Trevor Lawrence is going to be out of your price range. I mean, he's going Superflex startup right now, 106 to 108. I saw a mock yesterday. He went 101. Now, that's ridiculous. But, I mean, he is going first round in startups. And then the interesting thing is I've done 3 of them, and Fields, a.k.a. the 102, isn't going till – in that third round range. And so let's talk a little bit about Lawrence versus Fields and talk about, this class seems very, I don't want to go 100% special, but it seems like a nice class to reload your Superflex quarterbacks. Does 2022 have some nice juicy pieces that we should be looking at?
2022 does. And a lot of people right now think that Sam Howell out of North Carolina is the first quarterback off the board in next year's draft. And I like Sam Howell, but I disagree. The number 1 guy in the country coming out next year will be Spencer Rattler from Oklahoma, in my opinion. He is just special. And a lot of people, they saw the QB1 and they think, well, he's just a little baby, doesn't treat his teammates very well. And he's got some growing up to do. He's being coached right now by Lincoln Riley. And he got sacked this year, which was the best thing for him. And then he came back even stronger and better than ever. You watch him. He's got the tools. He can flick his wrist and throw the ball 40 yards down the field on a dime, wherever he wants to. He can throw on the move. He can throw under pressure. He's accurate. He's smart. And his maturity problem is his is just the way that he motivates his teammates is different from what people like or what they want to hear. He's in your face. Yeah. But he's sincere about it. Compare him to Matt Corral, who's just a jerk. He undresses his coaches on the sideline and throws his helmet and is a baby if he doesn't get his way. That's something that's a red flag. I don't think that Spencer Rattler and his maturity issues, if you want to call them issues, are even close to the same realm. And being coached by Lincoln Riley in a program that has all kinds of weapons, showcasing this guy's talent, I think he's going to be the number 1 guy off the board next year. And then beyond those two, you've got guys like Keaton Slovis, who took over for JT Daniels and had a kind of an off year. This was a really strange year with COVID shortened and some came in, at different times and things like that. But Keaton Slovis is a name that's been bandied about. And I think that there's some depth. JT Daniels is another one that should be the starter for Georgia next year. Every class ends up with 3 or 4 guys. There's usually 3 or 4, 5 that make it to round 1 of the NFL. But on average, only 2 per year for the last 20 years actually make it and stick as a starter in the NFL.
Yeah, we're always trying to project that next one, right? We're trying we try to project all 5 of them right off the bat, and it's not happening. So for me, for Devy, I avoid the quarterback position for the most part, even in Superflex, unless I have a taxi squad that's already chock full of running backs. And the reason is running backs are about a 35% hit rate. Quarterbacks are about a 6% hit rate. And if you want to spend all your money chasing that young quarterback, let me add to this. Everybody's like, well, what do you look for in a Devy quarterback? And that's just part of the problem is there isn't any particular trait. I've been studying for looking at the last 20 years. There's only been 5 quarterbacks that were
the recruitment number one guy, 5-star quarterback entering college, only 5 in the last 21 years that were drafted in round 1, and only 2 that were drafted 1 overall. Vince Young, Mark Sanchez, Matt Stafford, Jameis Winston, and Josh Rosen. And Josh Rosen right now is holding a clipboard somewhere. Jameis Winston is hoping to get another opportunity to start somewhere. Matt Stafford is still around. Mark Sanchez had an up and down career, and Vince Young really didn't last that long.
Right.
So it will be rare if Trevor Lawrence is the number one guy. And right now there's talk that Zach Wilson may be catching some NFL coaches and general managers' eyes as the number one guy. Man, that would be a blasphemy if that happens. However, it's possible. Look what happened with Mitch Trubisky over Deshaun Watson and Patrick Mahomes.
Yeah.
But who ended up the better fantasy and the better franchise type quarterback? Not the number one pick, not Mitch Trubisky. In fact, they're still looking for a replacement for him right now in Chicago. So if Trevor Lawrence does go first overall to the Jacksonville Jaguars, that'll be the third in the last 21 years. That's a 5-star that was number one in his class coming into college. And if Justin Fields is the second guy, no matter if it's number 2 or number 3 or wherever, if he's the second guy off the board, that's never happened. Back-to-back 5-star. They were 1 and 2 coming into college, and that has not happened in the last 21 years. I don't know if they did recruiting beyond 21 years ago, but I'm just saying that would be a very rare, and it could easily, again, it could be Zach Wilson, it could be Trey Lance. It really depends on what that particular franchise is looking for. So don't waste your draft capital chasing rookies or Devy when it comes to quarterbacks. Stack up on the unsexy Russell Wilson's. Russell Wilson's going round 3 of Superflex startup drafts right now, for crying out loud. Aaron Rodgers could be got for almost, I wouldn't say nothing, but a lot less. Ryan Tannehill, unsexy Ryan Tannehill. Kirk Cousins, unsexy Kirk Cousins. They got 10 more years, but you don't have to worry about the struggle. And unless you're going to pay up the money for a Patrick Mahomes or a Josh Allen, and look at Baker Mayfield. After his rookie season, he was going in top 5 of Superflex startups. He's going round 3, round 4 right now.
Right. We get so excited trying to get that new shiny, sexy toy, right? And in the first startup I did in the offseason, some guy really wanted to get into 106. He wanted to get Trevor Lawrence. So I traded him the 106 for the 204 and the 508, right? I ended up getting Dak Prescott and Aaron Rodgers with those 2 picks, and like that's going to have to be something really special when it comes to Superflex for Trevor Lawrence to reach that type of level. And I ended up getting 2 starting quarterbacks out of that. We got a question here from Bob Nixon, and you're going to have to help me out with this. Thank you. Exactly. It's exactly how I would have pronounced it. Right on the nose. So if you want to take over on this question, it says, where would you rank DJ? Say it again.
Uiagalelei.
Exactly. Among the 2022 quarterbacks. So where does he rank for you?
I would say he's probably 2. I like him better than Sam Howell, but I need to see more of him. And again, I don't want people to think, well, she doesn't really like Sam Howell. Yes, I do. But quarterback is so hard, so hard. A lot of it is opportunity. Now teams seem to not really stay as long with the guy that they draft. They're more willing to kick him out the door early. Look at Sam Darnold 3 years in, and the Jets are already looking to potentially take Justin Fields or somebody and say goodbye. Sam Darnold was a high prospect. So it really doesn't matter what I think about Uiagalelei. I do like him, and I would have him right behind Rattler and right ahead of Howell, but Howell is still very good. I think Howell will be a fine NFL quarterback, but a lot of it depends on the offensive line. If a kid gets early in their career, the ghosts like Sam Darnold, if you don't protect your quarterback and put weapons around him, that is not a recipe for success, and they will fail.
Yeah, not all opportunities are the same. You know what I mean? The guys get that opportunity. I mean, it's crazy to see what, Patrick Mahomes was able in the Super Bowl look like. And we've talked about Carson Wentz not getting any protection, and guys in the past that get hit that many times. Offensive line is huge, and that's a big thing. You talked about the hit rates there. Was that for Devy or was that for fantasy?
That was for Devy. That was for Devy.
Okay.
Yeah.
And we've hit on, obviously you said running backs. It's a matter of, 5-star recruits are super important, athleticism. And then we get to the wide receivers, or I'm sorry, I should say size, over that 200-pound mark. And the wide receivers, it's about athleticism. Mung and I were talking backstage about quarterbacks. Mung, why don't you hit her up with that?
Yeah, and to your point, Katie, it's almost an exercise in futility, right? Because it seems like quarterbacks just come out of nowhere. I mean, look at the late round guys like Dak Prescott, and even in the last couple of years, drafted highly by the NFL, but guys like Josh Allen and Justin Herbert fell in a lot of super flex drafts. I mean, how much do you take the scheme or the offense college into consideration when you're looking at quarterbacks? Because we talked earlier that nobody was on Patrick Mahomes, right? I mean, they talked about him as kind of an air raid quarterback at Texas Tech, and then we've got guys like Marcus Mariota, who really was elevated by the scheme by Chip Kelly over at Oregon. And how do you kind of measure up the quarterback himself versus that offense in general? Even looking at maybe Joe Burrow and that LSU offense.
Yeah, so let's use this year's class because I've been doing a lot lately on them. And a guy like Trevor Lawrence, what I look for is, what constitutes arm strength? Where does that come from? Just like basketball, just like baseball, just like any sport, it's all about the feet. It's all about the hips and the lower body. And if your feet and your footwork aren't in the right position, your upper body is going to fight against it or not get the power. And just like swinging a baseball bat or pitching a baseball, you've got to get the bigger muscles of the lower body are going to be the power, and the upper body is going to be the accuracy, and everything comes, your velocity comes from the swinging of the hips and the shoulders coming through. Trevor Lawrence has great footwork, whether he is from the shotgun snap, drop back, whether he's running to his right, whether he's bootlegging and coming back around to his left. He's got excellent footwork. You look for the footwork. And are they using all arm? One of my concerns about Zach Wilson, he does move around. He's very athletic. He has a strong arm, but a lot of times too, he tries to get cute and he's using just his arm. That was what Josh Allen did in college, and that's why he wasn't accurate. Once Josh Allen started getting that lower body working with the upper body, and that took a lot of work because habits are hard to break, good habits and bad habits. If you get into a good habit and you're constantly doing the right thing over and over again, then you will get better. But if you're practicing something the wrong way, you're only going to get better at doing it bad. And that's why kids in Little League, when they're shortstops and they're throwing the ball underarm over to first, it's working because it's a small baseball diamond. But once you get to the big 90-foot base paths, try to throw the ball accurately and consistently over to first. Now you're in a worse habit and it's hard to break.
You're speaking my language there. High school baseball coach for 10 years. And it's like, the more you practice a certain way, the harder it is to get out of those kind of habits. And watching that in football translates out to the exact same way.
Right. I was a baseball coach. I coached baseball, basketball, and football for 14 years, and not college and not high level, but Little League and high school and anywhere in between. But still, it's translatable. And in the season, you're not working on anything other than maintaining your habits. Where you drill and practice and try to get better is in the off season. And guys that are willing to work are the guys that will succeed. So that's what I look for. I look for the heart in Devy. I do try to listen to interviews. I try to figure out what their work ethic. I listen to coaches like Devonta Smith. He's not the biggest dude. Everybody's talking about his BMI, but his coach is like, you know what? The football weighs 13 ounces. Who cares how big he is? He's been in the SEC on Alabama, and he's been playing against some of the best cornerbacks that are big guys for the last 3 years, and he's been dominating. So how can you say he can't play in the NFL? So you got to look at the guys that have the traits. And then you look at the head. So Zach Wilson, my question mark about him, he has the tools. He's got the frame. Does he have the brain? Because he does some questionable things with the football. BYU Open is different from Miami Dolphins Open or wherever he ends up. And that's where people end up. And I'm not perfect. I'm not saying I've got a better scouting eye than anybody else, but I'm just saying that if I know that it's a hard position to shoot the needle, avoid it, get running backs, fill up my taxi squad, get the best talent. And then if I got 20 running backs that everybody wants, guess what? Smash accept that trade. Get that quarterback, get that unsexy quarterback that everybody's throwing around like they're candy. Guys like Ryan Tannehill can still be had for cheap.
Absolutely. I love the passion that you bring and the things that you talk about differently. And, I've heard you on Under the Helmet talk about at the Senior Bowl, where it's a matter of like the way the guy responds to not catching a pass or the way he runs on and off the field or those kind of things. This year is going to be a little bit different, obviously being mobile with the Senior Bowl, but now not seeing the combine. I mean, has that changed your process at all here down the stretch?
Not really. The combine is more check the box confirmation than anything else. You pretty much know. The big thing from here until rookie drafts will be where are they drafted in the NFL? Not landing spot, because I don't really care. Clyde Edwards-Helaire was driven up the boards because, hey, Kansas City, man.
We'll talk about Mung's guy. We debated this all last episode.
I do not dislike the man, but he was my number 5 out of the 5 top.
Yep.
I wanted DeAndre Swift and Jonathan Taylor were my top 2. Cam Akers and J.K. Dobbins were my next 2, and Clyde Edwards-Helaire was number 5. But I knew I'd never get him because he was going 1 or 2. And you've got to be patient in rookie drafts rather than try to fit a square peg into a round hole. If you know that you're not going to get a guy, what is the point of trying to trade up when he's at maximum value or close to it? Wait till he has an off season. Right now, is Clyde Edwards-Helaire cheaper or more expensive than he was last year?
Oh, considerably cheaper.
Exactly. DeAndre Swift, is he more expensive or cheaper?
Considerably more expensive,
Jonathan Taylor, Cam Akers.
We just had an episode on 2 weeks ago, and it basically almost has corrected himself, where Jonathan Taylor, actually Akers is going above where Swift is right now in startups, but those 4 guys have separated themselves above where Clyde Edwards-Helaire was. And, we can debate that later, Mung, but it's like a matter of you see the talent and that's where it goes. I have one more question for you, Katie, and I want you to, this is just kind of a cautionary tale, but I heard you speak about this a couple years ago where you kind of got cute and missed out on A.J. Brown.
Well, I think one draft.
Oh, no. I know you nail it, and A.J. Brown's my guy, but like just a cautionary tale about trying to get your guy and some of those kind of things, possibly for some listeners.
Yeah, so I had in one of my leagues, I loved A.J. Brown from Devy, his early film. I think it was 2016 when he was coming in as a freshman. And I liked him better than most all of the other wide receivers. I was getting him later in Devy drafts because he wasn't the number 1 guy. But in this one particular rookie draft, because of ADP, which is average draft position, he was going anywhere from 109, 110 or beyond. And I had the 106. And I wanted to move back a few spots, still get A.J. Brown, but I didn't charge the guy near enough that if I didn't get my guy, that I'd still be happy with the trade. And I ended up just totally blowing it. I tried to get a little too cute, try to get a little bit too much. But my point is, if you really like Trevor Lawrence and somebody wants to trade from the 102 to the 101 to get him, yes, you may like Justin Fields, but get a good piece on top of that. Don't just give him away, because I think that Trevor Lawrence is special. Now, does that mean that I don't want to take the discount on Trey Lance? If I have the 108 and I know he's pretty much going to fall there, would I trade up? I think Trey Lance has a huge upside. So I'd probably just be patient and wait and get him and be fine with that. But if you've got the 101 or whatever your draft pick is, even if you're only trading back 1 spot, make sure to make it worth your while. If you don't get your guy, that you're still going to be okay.
That's a great thing there. I mean, I have a lot of people saying I really want Justin Fields. I think I might take him at the 101, and I'm like, talk to the guy at 102. Try to get as much value. Everything's about value when it comes to those rookie drafts.
Yeah,
you want to make
absolutely.
sure you're getting the most possible and not just trying to. That might be your guy, and that's great. But move back 1 or 2 spots, go for it, and that's what you're going to do. Thanks again for coming on, Katie. We had a blast. I mean, among some of those names, probably for you as well, you're like, that's somebody I got to look into, and that's why we want to make our listeners better dynasty players. In order to do that, we bring on great people like Katie that kind of give you that extra information. So, Katie, thank you so much for coming on. Why don't you tell everybody anything you're working on and, where they can find you?
Sure. So I am the Diva of Devy. You can find me on Twitter at @FF_Skyler399. If you want to get into a Devy league and you've got any questions at all, just say, hey, can you DM me? I'll follow you so that I can private message and we can talk all the Devy players that you want. If you're in a draft, I have no problem suggesting a player or two, helping you with potential trades. Really hard sometimes to gauge, would you trade this Devy for this veteran? It's like, no, but here's what I would suggest that you do. I'm on Under the Helmet podcast, comes out every Wednesday on iTunes and Stitcher Radio. I do some on the premium side, some on the regular weekly show. So you may miss me a week or two, but I'm always in that rotation. And then on Off the Rails podcast, we record most Fridays and then it's out. You'll see, if you follow me on Twitter, you'll see me retweet the link. And I've also been guest on a lot of other podcasts, Rookie Fever lately. I'm very happy to be here and, just love talking football.
We loved having you on. Mung, anything else you're working on? I know you got some great things going on at Fantrax. Why don't you close us out here?
Yeah, I've been, like you said, as Katie's been talking, I've been typing up some notes in my Google Doc of some of these Devy names that I've never heard of before. So I'm definitely going to look into some of the players that she mentioned. But over at Fantrax, a little more of my wheelhouse. I've been looking at free agents, guys to buy at running back and wide receiver. The wide receiver article just came out, and tight ends are going to be coming out later this week. But of course, you can follow me on Twitter at FFA_Mung. That's MENG.
Thanks again for tuning in, guys, and enjoy the process.